Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Hello, friends. Thanks for being here. I hope this finds you in good health and safe. I wanted to talk today a little bit about questions that certainly I asked myself early on in this practice, and some of you may still be asking yourselves. It comes up. It's a point of reference many times, and I think as we endeavor to study outside of the Nichiren Gosho and the Lotus Sutra itself, or even in the Lotus Sutra, there are stories and fables and metaphors that, well, I think I can say that in daily life, our tendency is kind of to think in a shorthand. Let me explain what I mean. When we read stories about the medicine king ripping the flesh from his arms and offering them to Shakyamuni Buddha for the teachings, for the understanding of the Dharma, right? We see that visual, and we're very visual in our cultures today on the planet, right? Look at the tremendous, unfathomable amount of information that's thrown at our heads constantly from our phones, from the internet, from work, from the computer at work, from advertisements, from billboards. It's constant, right? We've even adopted what used to be just corporate advertising, right? You would see commercials on television and billboards and constantly being told to consume and buy. But more than that, imagery was telling us to do things, right? The smiling face with the product in hand. There's a lot of information that we assume visually, right? And the job of the writer, the author, is to, with words, create those kinds of mental pictures to inspire us, to move us, to convince us, right? So today it's near constant. It's I'm going to say something that's going to sound ridiculous, but it's a wonder to me sometimes that the capitalist industrialist complex of sell hasn't figured out how to implant our eyelids so that while we sleep, we continue to get advertising and marketing images into our heads. But, I shouldn't have said that, because now that I've said it, it's likely to manifest somewhere, right? Anyway, all of this has a point. Believe me, I can get into it. So, one of the amazing things about Nichiren was his ability and his mission to help us understand the nature, the real nature of our minds, and to disassemble these stories of all the sutras and commentaries and so forth, that these stories of the, like I used the Medicine King, but many stories where the verbiage is to lay down our lives for the law, to hear one more word from the Shakyamuni Buddha, one must or could somehow give their flesh from their bodies or burn themselves or anything like that. And Nichiren was literally now completely opposed to that kind of interpretation. In fact, the magical thinking and mysticism that seems to go along with that strong visual of somebody ripping their own flesh off just to hear 3 more words from Shakyamuni Buddha. He desperately wanted to correct that, and he knew that that wasn't Shakyamuni Buddha's intent when he was teaching this. He was teaching to a certain capacity in the people at the time to visualize and understand. They didn't have cell phones and internet and televisions and billboards and on and on and on. So the image in those days was extremely powerful in conveying ideas and concepts. Now we take it for granted and everything has become a hint. But in those days, an image was all-consuming. And over time, that just, the efficacy of that just pales. So I want to read to you a little bit of a Gosho, albeit a little different translation than I used in the Nichiren Gosho playlist, on the gift of rice. And there's a word that you've heard me use repeatedly. And this is the first that I've seen of Nichiren explaining the same thing and using the same word. Kind of stunned me. But he really, what he does is he equates our daily lives and the way that we do things in observing our behavior, our mind, our environs, the way we commit to things, and he equates those very things with those stories like removing one's flesh. And I think it's very, very important that if you're going to more deeply understand the Lotus Sutra, the stories of the Lotus Sutra, and Nichiren, and what we're trying to get at in this Buddhist practice, let alone studying older sutras meant for less capable, less visual people, how this Buddhism has never been about mysticism or magic or ripping flesh off one's body. This couple of paragraphs here, as Jacqueline points out, is so incredibly edifying. And this is what we're trying to do with this channel, right? You and I are trying to make these metaphors and stories meaningful in our daily lives, in our getting up out of bed in the morning and getting dressed and having our coffee. And how do we commit? How do we really... You've heard, we have all kinds of verbiage for this. I threw myself at the project. Well, you didn't literally throw yourself through the air, right? You threw yourself, you committed all of your energies to a certain endeavor. And that produced amazing results. And this is what Nichiren is constantly reminding us in our practice. Right? If you just sit and recite and go, Namo Myo Renge Kyo Namo, and you're not really into it, but you have enough respect for the practice that you sit yourself in front of your butsudan and you kind of go over it. It's kind of like if you're building a house. And you show up and you grab some 2x4s and you go, oh, let me hammer this nail for a while. One nail's good enough. Let's go to the next one. You're building a house. No one could argue that you're not. But how strong are you building that house? How reliable is that house going to be in the aspects that you want a house to protect you, house you, so on and so forth, right? So this is always Nichiren's preoccupation. But he does something really central in this particular Gosho. When he first moved to Minobu and retired there, he didn't have much of a support structure around him. There wasn't a corner store. He didn't have a bunch of disciples around him yet. He was living in an area in the mountains where the weather got pretty severe. And my first question is, why would he move to an area that was like where he got exiled to on Sado? Well, it was that he wanted more security. He was being harassed everywhere in Japan because the forces of the government and the rhetoric, because he had remonstrated. Nichiren wasn't quiet about his practice. He wrote major treatises and assaulted with these treatises the ruling elite. And their minions of the ruling elite saw Nichiren as a real troublemaker, a problem. And so everywhere he went, either he was persecuted or his followers were persecuted in his name, which made him feel horrible. So yeah, maybe it was kind of a self-imposed exile, but still he was in mainland Japan, and he could still communicate with his followers and continue his mission, right? So yeah, he went to an isolated place, but at first that cost him. He ran out of preservations. He ran out of food. He ran out of protections. And so when he got offerings like rice, and that's what we're going to read about, the gift of rice, he understood the precious nature of that gift. But true to form, not only did he laud that gift, right? We read a lot of letters where he thanks people for their gifts. But he also understands the implication of the giver. And this is where we start to understand these stories from other sutras and the Lotus Sutra of these amazing, fantastical, life-offering, which I don't want to call them offerings, but, when you rip your flesh off, do you call that an offering? Yet in the stories of the Buddhist canon, we read these stories often, over and over again. So Nichiren's going to make reference to it. Without further prep, let me get into it, and I think you'll begin to understand what I mean. So I'll just jump into part of it here. Nichiren acknowledges only saints and sages can do such things, right? Because historically, this is the modality that these kind of offerings are given in. That no ordinary person rips their flesh off and hands it to the Buddha and says, enlighten me, right? These are like exceptional people. So, if the offering of one's life is the cause that results in Buddhahood, then how can ordinary people hope to obtain it? That's a damn good question, Nichiren. How can I expect you and I, just regular schmoes, no matter what you've accomplished in life, are you one of those people that everyone in the world knows? Not that those are exceptional people, but the point is, in historic times, in order for your legend to be known, you had to be an extremely dedicated, fastidious person, whether you were a great warrior or a great leader or a great intellectual. Your name spread far and wide because of your feats. Not your feet, but your accomplishments, good or bad, right? And so the stories that we read of these exceptional things are generally of people that are of exceptional status. Not necessarily wealth, but like he said, well, I hate the word saint, but sages, very, all walks of life, who were exceptional. But we're told that this practice is for everyone. No judgment, no exceptionals, that we're all exceptional, that we all have this potential. So how can we convince regular schmoes like me will attain Buddhahood? How do we do that? With these stories, they seem too fantastical, right? So things get mystical. So Nichiren says, ordinary worldlings, you and I, can become Buddhas if we bear in mind the single word, resolve. I love it. Kokorozashi. Kokorozashi. I'm going to have to remember that word, kokorozashi. As for the meaning of resolve, when we consider it carefully, it comes down to the doctrine of, quote, observing the mind, end quote. And when we inquire into what is meant by the doctrine of observing the mind, means that offering one's only robe to the Lotus Sutra is in fact peeling off the skin of one's body. You see what he did? If you're cold and I have compassion for you, and I take off my jacket and offer it to you to warm you, that is an act not unlike ripping off one's skin and offering it to another. Do you see what he's done? He's talking about the attitude and the intent. If your resolve, if your determination is to be compassionate at a level where you will forego your own comfort to comfort another, that's the idealism of Buddhahood. That's how we manifest our Buddha nature in this life, Bodhisattva way. Without concern for the repercussions on ourselves, we offer something we have to benefit another. That kind of resolution, that resolve, that determination for comfort, healing, support. You could say it's a loving effort without concern for oneself. I'm not going to die because I give you my jacket to get you warmer. I'll be uncomfortable, but I would rather you be more comfortable than you are, because I perceive your discomfort to be greater than perhaps you can handle, whereas I am strong enough in mind. If only because I've helped you, I can more tolerate the cold, simply because of my act of helping you tolerate the cold. Do you see? Resolve. Nichiren is a poet in this respect. He continues, and that in an age when prevails offering the Buddha one's sole portion of food, without which one cannot sustain oneself another day, is offering one's life to the Buddha. This is how amazing I consider your gift of rice. Not because of how happy I am to have something to eat. Yes, I have great gratitude, but the symbol, the effort, the meaning of your offering does not escape me. I am humbled that you, not a rich person, great wealth, and remember the Dragon King's daughter in the Lotus Sutra? Offered the Buddha a rock because she held it valuable. It wasn't that the thing was valuable. It was the offering of something that had great value, the only thing she had of great value, to the Buddha, to be guided to enlightenment. There it is. She guided herself to enlightenment by giving up of her attachment to thingness and offering it to another, bodhisattva. She immediately gained Buddhahood. Right? This is the story of the Dragon King's daughter. Don't get too wrapped up in all of the particulars. It's the sentiment, the attitude, the intent, resolve for that compassion, that loving being. Now, just to further expound on what I was saying earlier, Nichiren railing on earlier teachers, because in his own time, people like Honen and his disciple, Pure Land and Zen and Amida, Nembutsu, right? They were all still teaching these stories and these same words of Shakyamuni Buddha, these sermons, and keeping them mystical, like they were unattainable by regular people. You had to be a special one just to be smart enough to somehow, or tolerant enough, to be able to make offerings of any real value to become enlightened. Well, that was never the mission of Shakyamuni. We've talked about that. And it infuriated Nichiren that they were taking really amazing teachings and perverting them into some kind of magical thinking, right? Some special order that only certain few could gain access to. That was never the goal of Shakyamuni or Buddhism. So Nichiren was railing against that. And he was demonstrating constantly that in regard to understanding this appropriately, the Lotus Sutra stands absolutely singular and atop all the other teachings in outright saying that this is your practice. This is how you attain your own Buddhahood. Enlightenment is in your grasp. And everything in the Lotus Sutra supported that. So Nichiren was strongly an advocate of the Lotus Sutra, but not just the Lotus Sutra, because these other teachers knew about the Lotus Sutra, but they diminished it. They made it unimportant because they had more power, more personal agendas, more influence by keeping things like a cloud, like nobody will get this, but there's I'll use them, and keep them at bay. Don't let them think they're as good as me or as able as me. Let me reign supreme. With the same teachings, I'll just keep them mystified. This is why Nichiren was so adamant against these teachers. They were poisoning Buddhism. And so constantly he did things like this. The sutras preached before the Lotus Sutra hold in essence that all dharmas are produced from the mind. Right? This is early Tendai, Chi. To illustrate, they say that the mind is like the great earth, while the grasses and trees that grow from the earth are like the dharmas. Not so with the Lotus Sutra. It teaches that the mind is itself the great earth, and that the great earth is precisely the grasses and trees. The sutras preached before teach that clarity of mind is like the moon, and that the purity of mind is like a flower. Not so with the Lotus Sutra. It represents the doctrine that the moon is the mind, the flower is the mind, From this we must know that polished rice is not polished rice, but precisely life itself. You see the little, the twist? You offer me a gift of food, and that's wonderful, and it satiates me, and it gets me to live a little longer. And it's not like you have great food stores. So what's at work here isn't the food. It's your great compassion for feeding another, especially another who is the votary of the Lotus Sutra. You see, you don't beget your life suffering. You see that there is no suffering for you in helping another accomplish great things. Their lives, prolonging their lives is an act that actually gives you life. Even though on the surface it may look like you're giving up your life, you're not, because of your attitude, your intent, your resolve to attain Buddhahood. This gift is an act of that resolve, of that instantiation, of understanding that the Buddhahood is in this very act. That your resolve, your commitment to instantiate your Buddha-ness, it's right there. It's innate. It's in you all the time. And in this act, you can manifest it. And so Nichiren will go on to explain that this is how Daimoku works. That simply by enunciating, invoking the Daimoku, how can I say it? We invoke that attitude. Our offering is our very life, our mind, our experience here and now. We offer it to enlighten. This is why Nichiren is so phenomenal. He demystifies all this stuff. And the point from the get-go wasn't to mystify. It was to try to get these points made to people of different capacities. But today, you can't, if you just sit and think about what's going through my mind right now, you have so many things going through your mind that you can't even identify that are born of this. You're surrounded constantly by these influences, these distractions. So if a practice of anything requires a tremendous amount of rules and behavioral changes and so on and so forth, it doesn't take long before you just give up. Screw it, I'll just do this. But if you absolutely know in your gut that when you do this simple thing, and it is simple, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, how much more simple do you want it? And you make it more and more powerful in your life by getting a mandala, using your senses, all of them, to focus in. Okay, it's time to wake up my Buddha-ness. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. That kind of ichinen, that kind of resolve, that kind of determination. You are taking your entire life and you're focusing it on your maximal potential. Unfettered, no obstacles. Get me to this place, this wonderful instantiation of mind that converts everything I see and experience into what? The Buddha land. It's not a different place. It's a different mental perception of the same place. It's a place of total opportunity, Opportunities that have been there all along, but that you could not see. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Wow. I guess I'll do that. I've never tried that before. It may come to you as, hey, you can do this, can't you? And you think, well, I don't know. I guess, I don't know. Yeah, I know what you mean, but I've never really done it. Well, I think you have the capacity. Let's go over here and I'll promote you and you can do this and that and this will be at your feet. Don't resist it. That's that new aisle of foods in the grocery store. That's that new opportunity that's been there all along, but you didn't know to observe it, experience it, swim in it, be in it, commit. We know this works. Like I said earlier, I threw myself at it and it just worked out. Yep. Throw yourself at Buddhahood. Throw yourself at your practice. You will get results. You're demanding results by throwing your focus at it. The world will change, but it won't. It'll appear as it has changed because you have altered your perception. Buddhism, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Does it make sense? So always remember, when we study, when you study on your own, when you look into nooks and crannies of things that catch your curiosity, remember always that when we study different sutras, different academics and translations and aspects of Buddhism, that we do so from Nichiren's point of view. We do so knowing that we instantiate our Buddhahood anytime we want. That from this place, the Lotus Sutra, we can see these other teachings as building blocks, validations, unearthing, like going into an attic of your mom's house or your grandmother's house or your house and going and witnessing prior endeavors, prior ways of being. And from those, you can touch on certain aspects of your own samsaric life and convert them immediately with the lens of the Lotus Sutra, with the lens of Myoho Renge Kyo. Now I see how that functioned in my life. Not that was an alternative life. Do you see the difference? Understand that study is about us unearthing all of the little karmic dust bowls in our mind and seeing them with the light, the flashlight of Myoho Renge Kyo. Not as alternate to Myoho Renge Kyo. There's a reason we no longer do those things. They didn't even work in samsara. For whatever reason, they got left behind. But going back and looking at those aspects, those earlier stories, those deep dives into things, understand how they relate to Myoho Renge Kyo. Always focus on your enlightenment. Okay? Attitude, intent. What are you doing with it? All right. That's, I guess, kind of shorter one today. But I wanted to touch on that. I'm feeling very inspired by some of you are telling me stories of success from rededicating yourself, from chanting Daimoku, even just putting up a Gohonzon, or mandala to wake your Gohonzon, putting your Gohonzon in your face, more or less. That act of enshrining your mandala is very much an act of attitude, dedication. By enshrining your mandala, you are committing, you're resolving to your practice. I'm going to sit my butt in front of this mandala so that I can focus my Daimoku. That's a huge cause. And so do it with respect. Do it well. right? Go online on threefoldlotus.com and look at the link for enshrining your mandala. Have an area prepared. Take away all of the distractions. Make sure it's a space where you can be quiet and safe. All of these things, see, they're part of adjusting your attitude and your intent. What am I going to do here? One thing. Instantiate my Buddha-ness. That's a powerful throwing yourself at your practice. So you better expect things are going to happen. Of course, if you just enshrine it, you close the room and you throw your boxes of stuff and you treat it like an attic, well, you're not respecting that effort much, are you? But if you enshrine it with respect, the causes you're making, the energy you're putting forth in your life, your attitude, and then chanting to it, how could you fail to experience your potential, your opportunities, right? Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. I'm so proud of you and your practices. I hear from you more and more, and that tells me that this channel is doing what it needs to do. It's supporting you guys, your independent practice, right? We're fractured societies now. We have to do this on our own. By doing this on our own, we will, when the time is right, we will gather other curious people, and we'll start building the Sangha. We'll have more support. It won't always be a rosy picture because that's the nature of forging a greater potential, right? You can sail a lake and you can get to know that whole lake, and it's lots of fun and it's beautiful. Then you get more courageous and you go out into a river, and the river changes, and you have to adopt and adapt to those changes. And then you go out into the great ocean, where sky's the limit, but sky's the limit not only for great, massive opportunity, but obstacles to arise. So learn to expect. Don't look for them. Don't instantiate them. But just know that as your life opens up, and it's amazing that when something becomes an obstacle, don't let it take over. Just recognize, oh yeah, I had to expect something would come. I will defeat you. I will simply instantiate my Buddha nature. And you, which look like an obstacle right now, will become a support, a benefit, a reward even. Because perception is everything. Not only is it everything, it changes everything. Right? Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. I'll let you go with that for now. I hope it inspires you to strengthen your resolve and your practice. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo.